For today's history video, I'd like to talk about the tax cuts that President Bush passed in 2001, before 9/11, and 2003. That they were obviously, in addition to the response to 9/11, the hallmarks of the Bush 43 presidency. But it's important to understand the sequencing and what went on. In 2001, Bush proposed a series of sweeping tax cuts, and the Democrats reacted by saying that he was cutting taxes too much for the wealthy and not enough for the average American. In order to deal with that criticism, Bush included in his tax cut package a provision for a child tax credit of, I think at the time, $1,000. It's since then gone up. And you would get that credit simply for having children under 18 living with you, not for anything that you actually did. Now, in the past, there was, for example, a child care tax credit, but there you had to put your child in daycare. Here it was just for having children. And this sets some very important precedents. First of all, it was the only time that we set up a tax credit and a refundable tax credit, which meant if you made too little to use the credit, you'd get money back for everybody. And it really was a new form of welfare that has since become very prevalent. The actual welfare system itself is fairly limited, something like 50 or 60 billion dollars. But $1 trillion is given in cash transfers that are means tested. And the child tax credit was really one of the first of these. And it set a precedent that I think was very difficult. And secondly, it meant that about 10% of America went from paying income taxes to not paying income taxes. And the essential dynamic we face now, where half the country doesn't pay taxes and half the country does, and 10% pays 85% of the taxes, really began with the Bush tax cut of 2001 in response to the Democratic pressure. Now, in response to that pressure, the tax cut was so tilted toward the average American that it had almost no economic effect. And of course, after 9/11, we entered a sort of a recession responding to that, and the tax cuts were either overshadowed by 9/11 or never made much difference in the first place. So in 2003, Bush passed a second tax cut package that lowered the rates on the most wealthy and lowered the capital gains tax. And that had an enormous economic effect. It set up the prosperity of the entire decade that ended in 2007 and 2008, which was foundationed on the tax cut of 2003, not of 2001. Now, of course, after the tax cut, Bush came in with huge additional spending for the war in Iraq, the war in Afghanistan, and Katrina, and that threw the whole budget out of whack. And instead of the balanced budget that he inherited from Bill Clinton, he began to rack up huge deficits of $400 and $300 billion. Of course, then when Obama came in, he exploded it to $1.4 trillion. But the sequencing of those Bush tax cuts is very important. Thanks for watching.